It's Matt Roush,
And Mike Brennan.
and we are back with another segment of the M Squared TechCast. If it's Monday, it must be time for Fred Brown. He has been with us just about every week for a year now, I think, or close to a year,
Yeah.
talking about the pandemic. Fred is an expert in this field. He's been involved in the creation of a bunch of vaccines and a bunch of viral research, including at the start of the AIDS epidemic, was sort of where he made his bones. And he has been an advisor to numerous state, local, and most recently federal government officials when it comes to the coronavirus and how it is affecting all of our lives. So, Fred, welcome to the show. And what do you need to share with us this week?
Thanks, man. Thanks, Mike. Well, gosh, I thought I'd talk a little bit about Michigan. We're
Okay.
not doing so great.
Yeah, I just heard us mention in the same breath on the NBC News report. I just heard us mention in the same breath with Miami Beach, which is not good company right now. So,
No, and we have all the snowbirds coming back now too, right? It's getting nice
God,
here,
I
and
forgot
people are
about
gonna come
that.
back.
Yeah. Okay.
And Miami is over about 60% the B117 variant of the virus, and that's a much tougher variant to get rid of than the original one. We're actually over 50% here in Michigan according to testing. I'll show you some of that data. Let's see. I will go ahead, and I've got a little bit of stuff up and ready. Let me see if I can just.
While you're doing that, I got my first shot of the Pfizer vaccine last Friday.
Yay.
And the only thing, I was a little tired over the weekend, but other than that, I didn't really feel any side effects,
Excellent. That's good news.
And I got my second jab of Moderna this Friday. So 2 weeks after that, I'll come give you a hug.
So where is?
You will be greeted at Fred's door by this very large dog.
Yes, right.
That's right.
I can hug the dog, but not
Yeah.
Fred. Right.
That's right. Maisie is a big Golden Maize fan, of course, Maize and Blue fan, she's Maisie Blue Brown. She lives right around the corner from the stadium, and she helps. She's a big fan. So hopefully today, she's a very good basketball, very good hockey, and very good football player, it turns out. Tends to disrupt the game slightly, but we have to come over and meet Maisie. So Michigan, here's sort of what's happening in Michigan right now. You can see that we've been relaxing pretty steadily from basically kind of May 20th. This is sort of the mapping of all of the things that we got involved with. And you can see this is the new case rate. And kind of November, December, right, especially around Christmas was our worst new case rate. And you can see that. And we were we had the non-essential businesses closed down on May 1st. On June 1st, we had a stay home order that lasted for a while. And then we went through the risk. We closed down the bars, but allowed people to get out of their homes. Then we opened the gyms. Then we started a new series, and we started to go up. And at that point, we decided, nope, we're going to work from home, no indoor bars, no businesses and that was extended from basically November 1st until the end of the year. And people thought, gosh, that was pretty draconian. And so on December 21st, we opened things up again. And January 13th, there were more businesses open, and finally, on March 5th, we opened up all the indoor gatherings up to 50%, and of course, opened up all the sports events as well for, as I recall, high school. So that's sort of our tracking. And unfortunately, you can see we went way up, we closed things down, and things went way back down again, and we're opening things back up again. And unfortunately, we're one of the leading states. We're one of the 22 states today that are actually indicating an increase in their rates of cases. So what's interesting is we are now pretending that everything's fine again. What you have to do is you have to wrap this around. So if you see back here, we start January, February, March, and this is 2019. Is how much people are moving around, and you can see here is our rate of moving around. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Staying home. So this is our rate of staying home, and you can see that about 20% of us were staying home all the way through 2019. But when the COVID virus hit, you can see that that's in the teal, and that went way up. All of a sudden, 35-40% of us were staying home in April, May. That was during the lock-in, and then again. right around middle of November. We had people starting to stay home more, and that peaked around right around January 1st, Christmas time. And since then, we've just been on a tear right down. See this slope going straight down? So if you look at where we are right now, we're about 22%. And if you look at back here in January, where we were at about 20% of people staying home. And so right now, we are acting like things are normal as far as our movements go. And what's interesting is the trips taken, right? And you can see once again that here we are, and here we are in the teal, and we actually are slightly higher in the number of trips we're taking now than we were in 2019 at the same time.
Oh boy.
So we are acting as though we are home free, well, from COVID, which is optimistic. Sadly, if you look at the reason for taking those trips, it was not to go visit it was not to go and visit the doctor or something important. It was non-essential, what we call non-essential trips. Those are the things that really have started to kick in now and are causing this new blip in movement. So we are pretty much acting like spring has sprung, and we're ready to go down to Daytona Beach and over and up and around. Now, this is what people are doing. It is not necessarily what we recommend doing. And that's an important distinction, because right now I wouldn't recommend you do this because here's what our numbers look like, right? We don't hear very much about deaths and hospitalizations because it takes about a 4-week lag in order for us to feel an increase in cases. So when we go from cases to deaths, it's 4 to 5 weeks. And right now we're at an absolute low point in the death rate, which is great news. It's something we love to see. The problem is that you can see that 4 or 5 weeks ago we were at the bottom, and now this is going to start moving back up again, and that's a shame because we're this close to the vaccine, right? And something that'll actually, I think, work for a large number of us to reduce the caseload. But we just can't seem to be patient enough to wait. And you can see that, here's the trend. What's interesting is you can see this this large death rate here. You can see early on, because we didn't know how to treat a lot of our people. So even though we did, and we also probably underreporting the cases slightly. But you can see that here, but the difference is we actually had fewer deaths, but much higher rates of cases. Few reasons for that. The nursing home was one of the reasons, as I said, and of course, as I said, the fact we know how to treat them better. But the fact is that right now we're having a lot more people who are younger getting sick than the over 80s. We'll show that in a second. Here's this Michigan laboratory testing, and this is what's very worrisome. Right now, we're only testing at about 30 to 40,000 tests a day, and we actually need to be up at 50,000 tests a day at an absolute minimum to understand what's going on. And in terms of the antigen tests, so in terms of knowing where COVID is, where it's expanding, where it's contracting, what the actual positivity rate is, how many people really are sick versus not sick. If we're testing at 50,000 a day, we're just at the edge of what epidemiologists like to say. We should be much more in the 100,000 to 125,000 tests per day if we want to get to a point of having a good established grid that says here's really what our rates are. And if we want to actually start to control with testing, we actually have to be at right now we're 50,000. We would have to be at almost we'd have to be at almost 1 million a day to really control the virus.
Wow.
It'd be at home tests you'd spit in every day, and you figure out whether or not you were sick or not. You'd probably do that once every you'd probably do that twice a week. And that's what major universities are doing who want to control the virus via testing. That's what large countries are doing if they want to control via testing. That's about what they give you a sense of just how far off we are in our number of tests. And of course, it's gone down significantly. Gone down by half since our overall peak of about 1,200, about 120,000 a day. And you can see the other big issue we've got is that we're not doing any real serology testing. We'll talk about how important serology testing is in a minute, but serology testing basically tells you your level of immunity. So it tells you, do I have the antibodies to fight off the virus, and are they the right ones, and do I have enough quantity of those in order to fight things off? And you can see right now we're only doing 4.7% of our tests. So if we're doing say 30,000 a day, which it's what, 120 that we're doing, is that right? 120 or so a day. or 1200, around 1200.
Well, the serology test is a blood draw, right? That's a little more invasive.
No, well, actually, the best serology tests are a dried blood.
Okay.
So you give yourself a little finger prick, you put it on a piece of paper, and you send it into a lab. And those are the most advanced tests. Are actually dried blood. The serology tests that we are using now that are with whole blood are a little bit less advanced, but they're also doable. Yes, but typically, so if you go and get yourself you can donate some blood, donate some platelets. It's always a good thing to do, and you can find out what your serology levels are as well. So that's sort of where we are now, and of course, whether you've had or currently have the virus, which is nice to know. Here's the number of laboratory tests we're doing. Our turnaround times are getting better. They're down at about, some of them are down in less than a day. Most of them are kind of a day plus. Some of them are up as high as 4 or 5 days, sadly. So that really doesn't help. But you can see we're at 8.5% positivity today. That compares to a 3.5% positivity where we were back in July and August time frames. And when you're up at 8.5 positivity, it means you're not actually testing enough. You want to be at about a positivity rate of less than 3%. Really, and that indicates that you're testing at about the right level in order to catch everything you need to catch. So we're just in order to catch where we really are, we're testing about threefold too low. Now, we heard about the Massachusetts school study, right? I don't know if you guys heard about that. But they decided to relax the constraint about 3 feet versus 6 feet, not for high school students, but for elementary to middle school students. They thought that was safe as long as the kids wore masks. And this is the data set that they had, and you can see that basically the stat, there are two case rates they looked at. One was the staff case rate, and you can see that basically whether or not you were at 3 feet or at 6 feet, the lines are pretty much aligned. It's not too bad. 3 feet's a little bit worse for staff overall. That peak there, that peak jump makes it a little bit worse. But overall, it's pretty close, and for students, it's very close. For 3 feet versus 6 feet. And so they said, based on that, we could open a lot more schools and have a lot more kids coming to school if we let the 3 feet rule stand. Now that means that the staff and the teachers will have to remain 6 feet away from all the kids, but the kids can be within 3 feet of each other. And the difference is, of course, that's in classrooms and outside of classrooms, when you're in cafeterias, when you're in hallways. So you should still, at a recess, certainly stay 6 feet away. And the thing that so that's what the general result. That was a result that happened last week. That was just reported last week. CDC is looking at that pretty carefully, obviously, and so was Michigan. And here's what Michigan is. Michigan looks at outbreaks, and you can see that of total of 645 outbreaks, by far the biggest issue we have is in schools. So, as far
Fred,
as
the type on that is a little bit small. Could you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I got to go to. I'm terribly sorry. I
Yeah.
got to go to slideshow.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
There we are. Can you?
But then we're having an eye test or something.
Yeah. So this is. I apologize. So you can see, of 645 total cases that we're concerned about, 162 of them are in schools. It's about 50-50 split between senior high school and K through middle school, as far as what we're looking at right now. You can see the other big area of concern we've got is still in the this is the skilled nursing facilities and long-term care centers. That also is fairly high at 145 total outbreak cases, and then the other areas are much more in the general economy where they're concerned. But school. Is still comparatively a place that outbreaks do occur, and we really want to think closely about before we go too a whole hog on this. It's a factor of how much ventilation there is. The elementary school kids are together all the time, 8 hours in a day, and so they have a lot of chance to communicate. And the masks don't tend to fit very well. And also school sports are known to be a pretty big spreader of disease, sadly, because it's just hard to play sports and have a mask on. It's hard to breathe. So
I do, one of my side hustles is public address announcing for high school sports, and we've had several teams had to go into quarantine. An opposing basketball program was exposed to a referee, and then they exposed us, and none of our kids got sick, but they couldn't play for 10 days. And then there was, a couple of hockey teams in the state high school hockey tournament had to drop out. And I know we've had at least one college team in the NCAA basketball tournament that had to drop out.
Yeah, Virginia did, right? Virginia Commonwealth did, fortunately. Yeah, so it isn't, there is a risk, and you really want to think about not just the child's risk, which is low, frankly, but the risk to your family. So if you're in a family with a diabetic or someone who has or immunocompromised, you may really want to think before you send your child off to school, even though it's something that everyone else is doing, before you get your vaccination. If you have your vaccination, I think it becomes a lot safer. Well, it certainly becomes a lot safer. But you want to kind of talk to your doctor about before you send kids in, especially if you're in an extended family situation. And hopefully, at this point, you've got the technology you need in order to support the children at home, and you figured out a way. A lot of people who are, especially single family mothers, are having a lot of trouble with this. So I really, heart goes out to them. If you look at the unemployment rates for the single family mothers staying at home, it's overall the unemployment rate for women is about 3% lower. Higher than it is for men, and about 60% of that, 60 to 70% of that is due to childbearing, and the importance of staying home with kids. And if you look at the women of color who are working at lower paying jobs, that unemployment rate goes up to 8 or 9 or 10% higher than the men equivalent situation. So I really, my heart goes out to them, but it's still a challenging situation, and you should understand all the risks you're taking before you do it. So now about the vaccines. The great news is we're doing up to 300,000 doses a week, and over 400,000 at one point. I think that we may actually get to 500,000 doses in a week, and I'll show you some calculations I did with that at the end of the talk. Here is the group ages, and this is sort of exciting because I think we might be starting to see the beginnings of a vaccination impact. If you look at the vaccines that are given to date, most of them are being given to people who are over 70 and 80 years old. So the percentage of people who are vaccinated over 70 or 80% are getting to be 50, 60%. And as a result of that, you can see here is what's happened from the very beginning of the pandemic all the way through today. And you can see that light blue line. And you can see that initially we had a lot of people in the nursing homes, that big problem with nursing homes, sending people to the hospital and sending them back to nursing homes so they weren't protected well. That's that huge case rate that happened at around March, April timeframe. And then we went down, and you can see how tightly the band is from 621 until 930. See how tight that band is? Now the 80-year-old, the 70, 80-year-old plus, they're on the bottom of that band. But notice that at the new band that's occurring, right? You're seeing that tighten up again, but the 80-year-olds are off the chart. They're down, by I would say kind of they're sort of half the rates of the others. Now you would have expected that the 80-year-old band would have come up with them if it's similar to what was happening in June, July. So my thought here is there could be an actual vaccination impact we're just starting to see, which is exciting, right? I mean, it doesn't look like much, and we're all going. The great news is it's all coming down, which is great. But that separation of the curves to me looks like something that's more than just our artifact.
Now, is this a national chart or just Michigan?
No, all of this is just Michigan.
Okay, good.
It's all just Michigan. Yes. So I wanted us to focus on Michigan today. So this is something international, but it's about AstraZeneca. AstraZeneca just announced its results. I don't know if you guys heard about it or not.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But they just announced the results. AstraZeneca has been having a lot of problems, right? They released their data very early on to the UK agency, where AstraZeneca is obviously world headquartered, could go ahead and approve the vaccine relatively rapidly. And as a result, the UK then administered policy that said everyone only needs one shot, not two. And they got their vaccination rates way up real fast. And they've been able to fight off the B117 virus better than their European counterparts by far as a result of doing that. The European Medicines Agency, I told you last week, was basically farting around. And there was lots of discussion about the price, there was lots of discussion about liability, there was lots of delays in approval. They finally got it all together, and then people started having blood clots. And we looked at all the blood clot material last week. And what it turned out is that there were about 5 blood clots that people were concerned about in different countries. There were Austria, Denmark, Norway. The most significant blood clot is one that drains some of the brain. And there were 17 blood clots. But if you look at overall, out of 17 million shots given, we would actually have expected about 30 blood clots to have arisen, not just 17. So even though we were vaccinating the elderly who are more prone to these problems, we had a lower rate of blood clotting than we would have found in the general population over the same period had they people not taken the vaccine. So the European Medical Review Agency has said we went through it with a fine-tooth comb. We looked at everything. I did look at all that data set, and it looked extremely clean. Part of the reason things got off on a bad track was because AstraZeneca partnered with Oxford, and Oxford is an academic institution, and they're not as strong at clinical trials as a commercial company would be. AstraZeneca allowed them quite a bit of leeway in the design of the trials, and so the result was they didn't get very good statistical significance. The United States said, we're not going to let you guys come in here, especially because we're unhappy with the over 50-year-old data. I don't know if you remember, the old over 50-year-old data sets were very weak. And so AstraZeneca said, okay, we'll redo the test. And so they got 30,000 participants to redo a test. They did it in a different way they normally see. Normally you see, here's our placebo and here's people got the vaccine. In this case, they had 2 different active groups. The first active group had a vaccine, had a dose on day 1, and then waited 4 weeks and got the second dose. Second group had a dose on day 1 and then waited 12 weeks for the second dose. And they've then combined those results and announced them. So I'm very interested to see whether or not the 4 and 12 week has a big difference, because if it does, that puts them at a big disadvantage, right? So suppose the 12 week is a lot better than the 4 week. That means you have to wait all that time, only having 1 dose where you get the next round. And that's a concern. So we'll have to see the data. It hasn't been reported yet. And the other, but overall, combined, 79% effectiveness and 80% for all those over 60 years old. Now they only had about 20% of the participants were over 60 in AstraZeneca, and then Moderna they had 25% of the participants over 60, but still very representative. And about, as I recall, 60% of those 20% had comorbid conditions like diabetes, weight, asthma, and so on. And that also result, no hospitalizations, no deaths, which is what we really want, right? So that's fabulous. Now, the issue we've got is that there is a variant out there in South Africa. They also were testing, and that variant, when they did those tests, this vaccine was only 10% effective. So we're really going to have to watch whether or not this variant comes. If we're going to use this vaccine, we're going to have to watch and see whether this variant becomes a dominant variant in the United States. And if it does, then basically what they did in South Africa was they just gave it away to neighboring African states because it wasn't going to be used in South Africa anymore. Right now we got 30 million doses in our stockpile, so that's a lot of vaccine opportunity. 20 million more doses will be released on the day the FDA approves it, which will likely be around, they're going to be reviewing probably April 15th, so about a month from now they'll have all the data together and review it, and it'll probably be released in mid to by around April 20th, I guess it'll be released. And then we have 300 million doses that we've negotiated. So we get a lot of this vaccine, and the cost of this vaccine is very inexpensive, $4 a dose compared to $10 a dose for J&J, and compared to $20 a dose, up to $20 a dose for Moderna and Pfizer. So you get a sense that there's things happening here, a lot of different dynamics happening. So that's the vaccine. Now here's what we're concerned about with the variants, right? And you can see the 1351, 143 cases reported in the United States, with 20 in 25 different jurisdictions. We got 64 total jurisdictions, so almost half the country has some of that 1351 in it. P1 is lower. That's the Brazilian variant, but you can see the B117 variant is reported in 50 jurisdictions out of 64 total jurisdictions, and we got 5,000 cases, and we're not testing. We're testing about 0.2% to 0.23% of all the tests we get back are tested for variants. And so that's an issue. And you can see here in Michigan, we started right there at number 8, where Ionia County, where they have the jail had a lot of cases, and you can see that it's been spreading quite a bit across Michigan now. And in fact, you can see that in the 420 cases that have been done, 58% of those that have tested positive are coming out positive for the B117 variant. And the reason this is important is because the B117 variant is 50% more transmittable. So you can't use the same old masking you used before. You got to wash your hands more, use heavier masks, preferably N95 masks. You need to distance more because it's that much more, it spreads more particles that are stickier and more adherent to you than the old virus, in a simple way of saying it. So, and the other thing is it's about 20% more deadly. So that's and we have one case. Remember how I said that there was one case where the 1351 variant doesn't work, that vaccine doesn't work. We have one case right now. If it turns out that these things grow fast exponentially, and so that's what happens, right? What happens is everyone thinks that, everything's good. Our vaccination rate, steady, 300,000 every week. So we're beating this virus, right? But the problem is the B117 increases logarithmically. And so Texas and Mississippi, for example, they relaxed measures back in February, thinking they were ahead of the virus. Everything's fine. Vaccination is going well. We're ahead of the virus. 3 weeks later, the virus, passes it up and just takes off. And that's where we are right now in Florida. It's where we're going to be in Michigan, because we've relaxed ourselves a little bit too much. And then sadly, we go through the cycle of saying, okay, now we got to flatten the curve. Oh my gosh, we're going crazy. And so we flatten the curve, and everyone complains and gets stuck at home. And then you have economic decline. And we don't want to avoid that up and down if we can by just being a little bit more patient, instead of going to Daytona Beach, instead of going and acting at the bars. Please don't do that, because this is where we are right now. We're at a point where B117 virus is going to start taking off. And the reason that's important is that here is how we look at herd immunity. Remember we talked about herd immunity? Herd immunity is the number of people that actually get vaccinated to protect those who haven't been vaccinated. And right back on January, when we were up against the old variant, our herd immunity levels needed to be 60%. That's and the formula is at the bottom: 1 minus 1 over R0. R0 is 2.5, so you get about 60%. At B117 variant, the R0 suddenly goes to 3.25. Herd immunity suddenly jumps from 60% to 70%. 70% of us have to get vaccinated all of a sudden, or get sick and recover, in order for us to beat this variant. And you can see right now, we're at right now, if you consider that we've about 11% of us have gone through both vaccinations, are fully protected. So we've had about 8% people have asymptomatic cases, and about 6.5% case rate overall that have been monitored and diagnosed. Right, we have asymptomatic and then the ones that have been actually diagnosed. We think that overall in Michigan we have got about a 25% immune protection rate. Right, so that's how many people. That's what we're at right now. So 25%, but we need to get to 70. It means we're missing 4.5 million people more have to be vaccinated, and that's a lot of people. Now, right now, we're vaccinating 300,000 people a day. Our max has been 400,000, and I said if we can do 500,000 a day, which is so we're talking about almost doubling what we're able to do right now, then we could have complete vaccination and get to that 70% by around June 15th. But that assumes that we're going to get a lot faster on our vaccination. If we don't get a lot faster on our vaccination, we're into the middle of July. And that requires two things to be true. The first thing is that the variants cannot pierce the immunity from the vaccine. And that's what we found. Remember, we found that was true in South Africa, that when we gave people a shot, you were only 10% protected. If that happens with the variants that are in Michigan, and our effectiveness rate goes from 95 to 10, and we allow that, and then people get reinfected, then we never will reach herd immunity with the current vaccination. It'll be impossible. I don't think that's going to be the case, but we just have to be careful and watch that. to make sure it's not piercing immunity. And the other thing is that, of course, if the variant's become even more transmittable and the R0 goes up again, then again, our threshold goes up again, and we're going to have to get that many more people vaccinated. So for right now, we're kind of looking at, to be safe if we're at our current rates, middle of July, but if we're able to speed things up, middle of June.
Okay. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it at that. So I think that's rather positive, so.
Yeah, as long as the variants don't penetrate the immunity, our immunity of the vaccine. That really is important to watch, and right now we don't know that.
Okay.
So far, it's looking good.
Traditional four-year students love Lawrence Technological University's thriving campus life, but LTU has always met non-traditional students' needs too. Lawrence Tech offers over 100 degree and certificate programs that can get adult students started or back on track. And most of our classes are conveniently offered evenings at our beautiful Southfield campus or online, so you can balance your social, family, and work life even while you power up your career. Lawrence Tech, where Blue Devils dare.